All right, good morning, people. I'm looking at the clock and it is 9:04. We had 4 minutes of technical difficulty. It's always a Wi-Fi. So anyway, want to say good morning to you guys. Thanks for joining us for coffee. And I'm super excited because I have my two teammates here. So I have Chief, I always call him Hoagie. I'm like, what's his first name? So I have Chief Dan Hoagland here, who is the AFPC Command Chief. And then my teammate here, Blaze, and I had to remember, I'm like, what's your name again? I call you Blaze. Stephen Blazier, the 37th Training Wing Command Chief. And we are hailing from San Antonio right now, actually at Lackland. And so you guys know the drill. This is my third time going live. So what I'd love for you to do is just give a shout out real quick. Let us know where you're dialing in from. We want to know the airmen that we're talking to, so give us your name, where you're coming in from. And again, the drill is we're just having coffee, and so we're not going to let Rona keep us from connecting and doing the things that women do. I know that every time I get to spend time with around you guys, like, I'm sharper. So I've known Blaze since Germany. We were young master sergeants at the time.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, young master sergeant. I think I was a senior master
You
sergeant.
were a senior. I remember the exact moment. So it was one of my first top 3 meetings I ever went through, and you were on the executive council, and it was that typical Joe Bass aura that I saw,
What is
like, in the room. And
okay, don't start telling stories.
Okay,
yet.
all right.
Okay,
I'm just saying, but I remember the moment.
I'm only a
I
little
remember
bit
the
into my
moment. But I
coffee.
was a new master sergeant. That's right.
And then I had the distinct privilege to meet Hoagie when you were at Shaw Air Force Base, you know, and what I love about Hoagie is he just kind of has this operator mindset, radio operator, who, by the way, again, Command Chief of AFPC. How cool is that? So today's theme, if there's a theme for coffee, is relationships. And so I thought, what a great opportunity, because so relationships make the world go round, right, guys? And so we're going to conversate. You know, I want you guys to conversate. If there's questions that you have for myself or these gentlemen, put them out there. I would ask that, though, we don't get too tactical in the questions. So if you have a question on, hey, Chief Hoagland, how come I don't have an assignment to wherever? That's probably not the question. You know, let's be thoughtful in the time that we all have together, and I appreciate you guys taking the time. So with that, I'm going to punt something your guys' way. So within your organizations, 37th and then AFPC, what's your biggest challenge? And then, you know, I feel strong about with every challenge there's a huge opportunity. So tell us, within AFPC, what is the biggest challenge that you have and what's your biggest opportunity?
So it's a great question, and to be honest with you, our biggest challenge is also our best opportunity, and that is this thing called digital transformation, right? How do we operate in the digital domain and sunset legacy systems that are not suitable for today's lethality and getting after the national defense strategy? And when I say the biggest opportunity on that is we have incredible warriors in our VP0 section, as well as our innovation cell, that have developed bot technology. We call them RPAs, not to be confused with remotely piloted, aircraft or request for personnel action, but it is robotic process and automation, in which one of them was highlighted recently and pitched at the last Spark Tank at AFA by Captain Monahan and the team. So that bot technology that we're doing at the local level is bridging a little bit of the gap of what we have lost over time with the true digital transformation. If you look at Amazon and Google, how far forward they are compared to us. Now, we have obviously some security constraints that we have to get after. Nothing bothers me more than our warriors deep in the trenches generating wins for airmen and families who have adversity at systems. Obviously, with the kickoff of COVID-19 and going to telework to the max extent possible, we still have airmen that are having a hard time getting on to build PDS, RNT, CMS, some of the things that are really affecting the airmen and the families in the field. How we get through that, maintaining resiliency as well as mission first focus, stagnating shifts, coming in, making sure we're physically, distant from one another and just collaborating together to get to the best. But IT definitely, I think, our biggest challenge in the portfolio, but our best opportunity moving forward as we sunset things.
So I think that's our biggest challenge across the Air Force enterprise is that IT piece. Before you say something, I just want to share my story on AFPC. So I never went to AFPC until I was a command chief at Goodfellow, and so for 20-something years, no disrespect to my AFPC teammates, I was like, what are they thinking? You know, what are they doing? They don't have a clue. You know, they're just hosing our career. You know, I'm just being real. But then, as a command chief at Goodfellow, I actually take I took a team of chiefs down with me to visit AFPC and to go into your buildings, Hoagie, and to be able to see the men and women like us who are maybe one deep or two deep. And at that time, we were pushing out the new EPR system, tech sergeants, and there was like one person kind of doing all the tech sergeant EPRs at Goodfellow. And oh, by the way, they were reservists. And so it's just great perspective that, you know, everybody who's down in your formations are great Americans doing the best they can, like the folks in our formations, and we don't necessarily have the best manning and the best IT.
Absolutely. How we counter that is we have to be transparent, right? So we live by a model in AFPC to be agile, innovative, and responsive. That is why we don this uniform and run to work every single day. Visionary leaders doing extraordinary things. Manpower is a concern, right? But we have fantastic chiefs, we have fantastic directors that look at this on a daily level on where we can redistribute some of our return of investment, right? So as we push innovation and we bring newer IT solutions, we have an opportunity right now to recapture some of that manpower, you know, in the instructor recruiting special duties, some things that we're trying to get across the goal line that's on the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force. And Joe, I'm with you. I'll tell you, for 26 years, I thought AFPC was nothing but no. And I say this when I go out on the road shows, that they have a matrix that everything needs to know. Day one.
I didn't think that bad, but
I did. Day one of walking through the hallways, I actually had a tear in my eye when I stopped at a pillar, and on there were all of these messages from the field to our airmen. This was in the Total Force Service Center. And I sat there and thought, you know, that's no different than putting skull and crossbones on the side of an airplane. This is their mission set. And I tell you, the 2,700-ish that takes care of 2.1 million folks across the globe are bought in, they're determined, they're passionate. It is extremely humbling to serve along with us. And my whole view changed of AFPC.
I love it. All right, AFPC. Okay, the mighty 37
right.
that falls under second.
Warhawk Nation, that's right. So, yeah, 37th Training Wing, it certainly has been an adventure. I think about the challenge. So I remember, you know, just across the street when we had those who were coming back from the cruise ships, right? I remember they came back and we were having a quarantine over here. And I remember seeing it just across the street from our graduations for BMT. But who would have known the fast forward 30 days that would actually be impacting, you know, us on our homeland.
Yeah.
So I think for us that certainly was a mental challenge on the forefront, and then, you know, the tough decision that had to be made on the graduation day that we couldn't allow families in the face.
Yeah.
That hit us emotionally. That's a moment that we look forward to celebrating. Yeah. And that was just tough for us all to deal with and work through. But the ultimate call was the right call to keep people safe, keep our families safe, to keep our airmen safe, and it had to be done. It certainly had to be done. And I think if you look at just the evolution of that at different phases, it's always been at contact. It's a challenge because it's such a big shift from what we've always done and what we always look to celebrate. But I would just like to highlight too for our wing, it's not just BMT. I think externally a lot of times people think 37 Training Wing, they think just BMT. We have about 30% of all the tech training portfolios in the Air Force, including security forces, contracting. We actually have a recruiting school that's here. Near and dear to your heart, we actually have the Center of Excellence for Aircrew and many other ones that are out there, services. But we also have two other groups that do international missions with DLI that teaches English language, and then the beautiful Viva IAPA out there, those who are, which is an amazing mission set. And if you look at those two groups alone, that we have students that come to us from, you know, over 100 nations around the globe to take part in that mission set. This is really challenging to look at you and look at the camera, but anyway, but
that's loud. Okay.
But I would say that those challenges, what has been so beautiful is the opportunities that have come forward for us to modernize and think about new ways of doing new things. because the mission doesn't change. Our mission is we're still producing the world's greatest airmen. We're still building teammates and partnerships around the globe, and it's made us really hyper focus on that. Take a hard look at ourselves. So in BMT, one beautiful thing I'll tell you that's happened is we've actually aligned. If everybody out there that's an airman, they remember when you came to basic training, you would see the different flights come in different week groups. And you had your senior flight, you had your junior flight, you had your rainbows who hadn't gotten haircuts and they were still in civilian clothes. But now what we've actually done to protect everybody, because our priorities are, we're going to make sure that we protect our people, our families, our staff, our students and our trainees, but we're going to maintain the mission is our second priority and maintain great partnerships. What we did is actually align every squadron to a week group of training. And the beauty of that is, for the first time ever, is those squadrons actually, they do pickup, they move that whole group of trainees. So today, we're graduating, 630 are going to be graduating today. But then that squadron gets the reset. That squadron gets the families get to reset. They get to actually clean out the dormitories, so we get to get after infrastructure, we get to reset the cadre, they get to reconstitute a little bit, because it's a grind being here in these mission sets. And same things we're starting to see on the tech training side to evolve and move faster and push the fuel to our Air Force out there, and it's just been great. And I'm so proud. And I would say this is where all the DSD processes that your team is a huge part of. You know, that talent that we recruit from across the Air Force has come here and it's been tested and it's been proven. This is not luck that we've had the success we've had as far as keeping people healthy. It's because the talent of our NCO tier that's here making a difference.
So, you know, when we think about opportunity and keeping with the theme of relationships, you know, when COVID happened, I mean, and I remember that day because I was here when we had to cancel the BMT graduation, and that was painful, folks. Let me tell you, I think I talked to you on the phone several times. I mean, internally, I was boo-hooing because, you know, I'm a big softie, and I hated that we had families here that couldn't do it. But so relationships, the reason why we are where we are today and having succeeded in my mind, and we continue to fight through this COVID pandemic, is because of relationships. You know, the 37th is able to talk to AFPC, and that relationship that you guys have has enabled us to be able to move our airmen out. Our relationship together, that close mission partnership, has been able to move our tech training graduates out to their locations, and it's been working, you know, so it's not perfect, but it works well, and relationships is honestly what keeps our Air Force propelling. So with that, we teach our airmen that are coming in. I wish everybody who's watching us or listening right now could come to a BMT graduation, because it's something that just gets you, you know, because the folks that are coming in today's Air Force are fired up, excited, their commitment's high, and we teach them about the Air Force family. Mm-hmm. So, but we probably weren't all bought in, and I tell people all the time, I don't know that I was bought into the Air Force family as a young senior airman. You know, I was still kind of out for me. We are teaching our airmen today about Air Force family. Can we talk about that? I mean, like, you know, where are we winning with that in your formations? Where do you think we're getting it right? Where do we need to grow when it comes to really our airmen feeling like we're family, having that relationship?
Yeah, so I'll if I can take this one first. Absolutely. So I recently did a couple Zoom sessions with our MTLs, our tech training instructors, and of course talking to the military training instructors. And I asked them, I said, hey, through all this, what have you learned as an NCO, right? What is the one thing that stood out? And they said that really the two biggest things that were consistently the answers was compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy for the people that I'm charged to lead and take care for. And what I've seen through that is that, like, that love for who you are serving, right? That you are there to support, and just your awareness of what's going on in their lives. Because I honestly didn't know at first, would we still have recruits that would come? I didn't know. When COVID picked off, would people still, men and women, still pour into our Air Force? And it didn't lay off a bit. And I would tell you, at first, every one of them is actually being made better through this experience because of the bond they're building as a family. When you see the flights, they form a family early on. Like before, I would tell you, we hit them with the shock factor, and it's still basic training in the 737 training group. But all these formations, I mean, you have tech training students that cannot leave the installation, but it's forming a bond and a relationship early on in their career that they're getting to see that Air Force family. I think earlier than we did. They're reaching out to each other, they're connecting to each other because they're going through the same experience at the same time. It is the common bond, and I think we've seen that across our Air Force and some of these forums that are popping up because we're all dealing with this common threat.
So before Hoagie you speak, speaking of family, so we have 3 teammates back there behind the camera that you can't see. So we have Sergeant Charleston, Sergeant Mitchell, and Lieutenant Trudell. If we have questions, because remember we're having coffee with our folks out there, make sure you chime in. But real quick, Hoagie, do you have?
So, huge kudos to Blaze and the entire 37th of fusing character, compassion, empathy, everything to give us the lethality of a full up round as an airman. Different than when I was squirted out from here many moons ago, right? Again, confused, no idea, grew up in an environment where, hey, Airman Hoagie, go turn that rock and you'll stop when I tell you. Now, I think the Air Force culture is airmen have a voice, right? Because we as leaders have to listen to them. We as leaders have to listen when they come in to say, hey, sir, ma'am, I think I have a more efficient or a better way to get after this. And as we drive autonomy and authority down to the lowest levels, we have to be able to allow them to fail forward and have their back and then bring it into coach, teach, and mentor. But culture is very, very, very important to me. I know it's very important to the Air Force. I'm seeing more airmen coming in with a airman first approach than they are skill set dash, right?
Yeah.
It's good to still have our tribes and have a little bickering back and forth, ops maintenance, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, everybody is an airman, and I see that airman first approach as we move forward.
I agree. And then we're getting ready to have a question. I do want somebody to ask about relationships and family. So my thing is, we've, I think, all personally struggled in our own personal relationships with our kiddos and our family because sometimes we put this uniform first. So we need to talk about that. Somebody asked that question. All right,
Chiefs, we have a question from Matthew Robinson from Monterey, California. He asks, what role will 2nd Air Force play in standing up the U.S. Space Force, initial skills training, or the new STARCOM?
All right. Chief Robinson, why you gotta put me on the spot about space? So there's a whole lot of questions about what we're doing with space. Here's what I'll tell you. So the tech training squadron that we have that has to deal with undergraduate space training is going to go over USSF starting on the 1st of July. So we are in the preparations right now to transition that squadron over to Space Force. However, we will walk hand in hand to make sure that that transition is seamless, that the personnel supporting that still continues on. We're one team, one fight. We're still going to be on the base there. So we're transitioning. It'll be 1 July. All right. All right. Okay, so tell me this. Were you always a relationship builder?
No, not at all. I think for me personally, and it's interesting. I've seen airmen that wait up to a year to come in the Air Force now. I went to the mall to buy a pair of Jordans. I walked by a recruiter, and 2 weeks later, I was in the Air Force Open General. I just wanted to do something with photography and art.
Open General too.
I wanted to do photography and art. There was a job on there that said photographic interpreter. It had the word photo in it, and I didn't realize that was Intel. And I ended up doing that for a majority of my career. So I just knew that I had never left the state of Florida, never been on an airplane. I just wanted to go out and kind of see something. And I think for me, relationships were tough early on because the Air Force was different. I bought into what I got at basic training, but I didn't see it in my first base. I didn't see a family kind of dynamic, and it honestly offended me. So then I was trying my best, but then I saw a supervisor doing the wrong things. Now what's interesting is through that is Chief KP. He was there at that first assignment with me.
That's your BFF.
That is that's my ride or die. You know what I mean? And he and I even had this weird relationship early on where we were just hyper competitive with each other. But now he's made my life so much better. But I would say early on, it was hard for me to realize that it's more about us complementing each other than competing with each other.
Yeah.
And that the power that we know is that there's so many times where it's not just I'm going to pick the phone when I need something from you. The bond as brothers and sisters is a real thing. Yeah. It's not just this transactional kind of thing. It's truly where we have to cultivate those relationships early on because it's essential to everything we do.
So I like what you said about competing. I think there's healthy competition that we can have. I have, one of my girlfriends, Yvette Weir, we were senior airmen together, and, she's like, oh, I just signed up for a college class. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sign up for a college. So we were competing with each other. And then, Chief Todd Simmons, I always bring him up because, he was at Air University. I'm at 2nd Air Force, and he thought he was the best chief, and I thought I was, so we're always competing like the 2nd Air Force, and he's like the AU. So I think there's good, healthy competition, but then there's unhealthy competition. But were you always a team? Tell us when you transitioned to being a
I think I was, and probably one of the main reasons is I grew up as a military brat, right? So when people ask, hey, Hoagie, where are you from? I say base housing, just because my father had served, 27 years, and then my brother joined right after high school.
Was he Air Force Army?
Both were Air Force, yep. And then, so come for me to graduate high school, I don't know if my dad's listening or not, but I really didn't have a choice. I remember the doorbell rang at Hanson Air Force Base, and I opened up the door, and there was a young staff sergeant recruiter, and I said, oh, you must, because my dad was an active duty Air Force recruiter at the time, CMF sergeant. And I said, oh, you must be looking for my dad. He said, no, I'm looking for you, son. Uh-oh. So 17 years old, next thing I know, my mom and dad are signing the documents, and out I went. I was actually in the Guard for 6 months prior to coming on active duty. I was not a good airman in the Guard. I didn't go to school. I made some wrong decisions, and my dad said, hey, dinner plate's out the door, you're going on active duty. So what I learned from him and my wife, now, my wife is a senior master sergeant on the ATC staff. When it comes to relationships, it's the difference between when we're at work and then when we get across the threshold at home. And my wife will tell you every time she brings something up to me now is, I don't want the chief answer, right? I want the husband answer. And sometimes that's hard on the light switch, right? Because we row so hard throughout the day. What I'll say about relationships is anybody that's been in the joint world, if you've seen a ComRel chart, this big spaghetti chart of, ADCON, OPCON, TACON, a commander in that environment will tell you it's not about command relations, it's about the relationships of commanders. And that's no different if you flip it upside its head. It's no different than us as chiefs, it's no different than a frontline supervisor building those relationships to get to yes, to get to a collaborative effort. This isn't a win or lose type game. Sometimes we get there right at the end of the day, but it's a zero sum, everybody rowing in the right direction to impact the mission and be a part of something that's bigger than all.
And I think, like, to me, I think your team, that's around you, you forge that relationship with them, but you don't realize how much we're all connected.
Yes.
Like, everybody's rowing, but they don't even see the boat that's next to them, or they don't recognize the value of the boat that's being rowed next to them.
Absolutely.
And I compliment, like, all day long, I'll co-sign that one there. In that mode of how do I serve two families? How do I have energy left when I come home for probably really my most important job?
That's right.
Because I think about it all the time is all of us, someone's going to tap us out of formation.
Yeah.
Someone will replace us. We're these seats temporarily. But no one should ever tap us out of home. You know what I mean? No one should ever, as a husband, as a father, as a mom, like whatever that is. And I think that is the tough life though, is trying to balance those two things.
I agree.
And I honestly wish we talk about this topic in ALS and NCO Academy.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be the demand.
I don't think that we realize until we're further along in our career how to really value that. I know I didn't. We'll talk about that later, but we got another question.
Okay, Chiefs, next question comes from, just talk into it. Comes from Aaron Moore at Hickam. How can we work on developing better relationships within our shops and other shops?
Great question.
So, I will just say, again, that was me, and I know y'all have heard it before. I don't think I was always the best teammate. I was a good worker. I was a good airman. I had, high competencies. But I was also, as a junior airman, kind of looking out for number one, and so I want y'all to learn what I learned as a senior NCO when I really realized that, man, it's about taking care of my people, and I can only do so much if I just count on my own abilities. But if I brought in, my perspective and I start thinking kind of abundance, and I realized that, man, if I have a relationship with the finance NCOIC and the MPF NCOIC and somebody at the med group, what an amazing, opportunity to better take care of my teammates and those around me. If I cultivated the relationships in the flight records office that I have, and I cared about growing strong leaders and teammates, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. If I cared about that more, how much more we could have just been a stronger team. And so that would be what I'd offer.
Yeah, I that's a great question. Really is a great question. What I've learned is that if we could, it's tough because when we see each other, we're wearing ranks, we have certain backgrounds. From an external perspective, you see things, and you can't help but that kind of creates somewhat of a bias, and it impacts interactions. But Staff Sergeant Celeste Harrington, a shout out to you out in USAFE. She reached out to me and we had a great conversation. So we teach at basic training. Hey, you're an airman first, right? You're a specialist second. She reached out to me and she's like, hey, I challenge that. You're a human first.
I love that.
You're a human first.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like that is such brilliance.
Just be a good human.
And I think if we could learn to start there, like, hey, learn where I come from, learn why I choose to serve. Don't look at me for the rank I wear. What are my talents, skills, abilities, passions? What am I connected to? Who do I serve for? Right? If we can learn those things about each other, it opens up the doors to everything.
Okay, I know you're about to get on it, but connect. So the only way you're going to be able to build a relationship with your teammates is connect. You have to actually talk, communicate, learn something about each other. And really, it's through the challenges also. I mean, I have bonds forged with people I went downrange with. There is something about going through the suck together. There's something about being in the dorms together. There, where you connect and build a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, going along with Blaze's comments, I think you have to speak truth to power as well. So if you see something that's illegal, immoral, unethical, dumb, dangerous, or different, we have trained our core to be able to speak up, to be able to have those intrusive conversations, and people not be offended by it, right? Because it's a collaborative aspect that we're all airmen. I don't view my chief stripe as mine. It's not my stripe. It's your stripe. It's my family's stripe. And it's to be used for good and not evil. But it's about analog conversation. In this digital environment, I want to say it was General Hostage years ago. It said, hey, how do we maintain analog communications in a digital environment? And it's frontline supervisors doing knock and talks at the dorms, right? To go check up on their airmen, to say, hey, what's going on? What do you need? What do you need from us? Getting involved with the family, right? I grew up in an environment, again, I wasn't the greatest airman, and some buffoonery in the dorms. My frontline supervisor, I could guarantee you every Friday night, Staff Sergeant Jordan Honeycutt was out there roaming the dorms looking for me, making sure I was making smart decisions, and kind of coach, teaching, and mentoring as I kind of moved along. But without a doubt, the backbone of the United States Air Force is the NCO Corps, and we put a lot of authority and drive for you to go out there and execute, and we have your back. Have those tough discussions.
Let me tell you, the other relationship builder, coffee.
Yeah.
So, seriously, I mean, if you break bread with somebody, there's times where I have been at odds with teammates. And I'm like, hey man, can we just go to Subway, and, especially at the Pentagon. I mean, we would go downstairs, and next thing you know, we break bread and have a coffee, and life is better. Okay, what else?
Okay, Chiefs, next question comes from Javon Leach. He says, Chiefs, relationship building starts with foundational skills of social awareness. What are your thoughts on the importance of deliberate education on emotional intelligence in our Air Force?
We need more of it. Honestly. It's funny that you say that, Javon. So I just came from, the reason why we're here in San Antonio, Lieutenant General Webb had a gathering of the torch. So he brought in his, what he calls his Big Six, and we were talking about DAWN, which is developing the airmen we need. So that's kind of the strategy that we're getting after here in ATC. And we talked about competencies and what we need to build in airmen. And I was talking to General Spangenthal, the A3, yesterday, and I'm like, emotional intelligence. We can't get after that enough. And we didn't learn that when we came in. So perhaps if I learned some emotional intelligence, I would have came on board more of a relationship builder, more aware of, the folks that are around me. But what do y'all say?
I think that's perfect. The other thing is, we have to be able to listen to understand, not listen to react. Yeah. And with the leadership shifts and where we're going in, the 21st century and modernization is, is the ability to connect at an emotional level, right? The ability to understand the underlying issues with airmen and their families, and not be immediately jumping to the gun with, well, here's, I've already solved your problem for you, right? We got to get through some decision matrix and some problem-solving solutions for airmen at their level, because if you don't learn that as a young staff sergeant, as you propel in your career, you're going to have other airmen salivating to be you. You know, they want to be you, and we got to teach it down. But I absolutely agree with you, Joe. Emotional intelligence is huge.
And they're soft skills, and it's squishy, and people don't really like that. I mean, I know people in our formations now who, if you bring that up, they kind of turn the light off, because they're like, man, what are we talking about? But it's critical.
Yeah, we've heard this phrase. General Webb has said it many times, many senior leaders, but calm is contagious, and we have needed that poise in this storm to really kind of set the pace. And Colonel Generos, the wing commander at the 37th Training Wing, he said this statement that he used to work in Joint Staff under General Jacoby, and he said he had this patch on his desk and it says, "Stop screaming, I'm scared too," right? Stop screaming, I'm scared too. And I think it's, we serve in this with our hearts, but you have to realize is like we realize the impacts anxiety is having on people and some other things, but you gotta learn some techniques and some tools to be able to operate under that and recognize facts, because sometimes it's just your internal emotions that'll actually feed into it. So I think that teaching those things early on, and you're right, never even heard of emotional intelligence, but I think that piece of self-awareness and to be able to lean on, hey, let me gather some facts and information. That may be an accusation, that may be, but let's search that out.
Absolutely.
Before you have people in a room that are next thing you know yelling and screaming at each other, and it doesn't help anything.
Yeah. And if I could real quick, I want to give a shout out to Chief Chad Pryor and Chief Becca Baxter, two incredible teammates, because sometimes I struggle with the difference between emotions and passion, right? And there's a difference between the two of them, and sometimes I hit that threshold. And to Major General Toth, who does a great job too as my wingman, to hey Hoagie, maybe not now, maybe that's not the email to send, or that, because we need those teammates so we can go home and self-reflect, or we can look internally to say, okay, yep, I've breached the emotions, now it's completely gone into passion, and I've lost my way, right? I've lost the focus of what the problem statement is and what the intent is to get there. So huge shout out to my teammates for the support.
Yeah, and you called me several times on that when I call you emotional.
You're not. Sometimes.
You need to sit
But
down.
that's what we do. That's what we do as brother and sister. We have to kind of iron sharpens iron and kind of call each other. So, Jovan, I want you to type in what your thoughts are on that, and everybody else on the EQ piece. Here's what I would offer. IQ will get you so far in life. So you being smart in whatever discipline or functional, area is going to take you so far. I would submit to you that in the more senior ranks, you better start to have some EQ. Like, I full on do not have a strong IQ, which is why I keep strong, those Intel folks around, so that they can help build up my IQ. But at this level, we better figure out that whole EQ piece. People will hire people based off of EQ, and that is especially applicable outside of the Air Force and in the military. All right,
Chiefs, next question. Jason Sarret says, good morning, Chiefs. Will you share your thoughts on followership and how it ties into the discussion so far?
Oh, I love it.
Ooh.
Take it away, y'all.
So this might not be a popular statement, but I'm going to say it because I'm very candid and transparent. Everybody's tracking when we read about toxic leadership, right? And I think there's this thing called toxic followership. I really do. We put and we levy orders that are legit and legal to airmen to go out to execute. And what I challenge all of you who run a formation is, when the boss pushes the intent out, or higher headquarters pushes the intent, it's our job. That's why we're assessed. That's why we did this, walked across the threshold to get after, take care of those orders. But when you sit down with your team and you explain the why we or that unit organization is going in that direction, go put your ear to the door after folks have spread out. And you might very well hear some people saying, I have no idea why the boss is doing this. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I can't believe. We got to do a better job of bridging that and explaining the why and getting after it. That's what we do. That's why we're 0.94% of the U.S. population that dons a uniform. So that's very, very important to me. Followership, I don't think has a rank structure to it, right? There are A1Cs and senior airmen in the Air Force right now that I would follow up a hill and take a bullet and plant the flag, right? And that's a different followership than maybe leadership styles. Just like there's some folks' leadership styles that I don't agree with, right? But
hey, we're all followers.
Yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think you can be a good leader until you learn how to follow. And today, as a Second Air Force Command Chief, I've got to support my boss and the decisions. That doesn't always mean that we are always in agreement, and we have to learn the art of communication and being able to shut the door and share our thoughts. But ultimately, we are in the profession of arms, and so we follow the rules of those appointed over us.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Jason. I think it's something where it really does start to separate. We talk about character kind of stuff, right? Will I go and execute a decision that isn't I don't believe with just as well, or will I half step, right? And you can see it all the time, And I've seen people where they literally exercise. Well, I'm gonna wait it out. I'm gonna wait them out. I'm gonna slow roll you, and that does nothing but harm to our team, especially when the order's been given. There is a time for discussion. But there's a time to move out, and we have to be able to do so. And I think even fundamentally, look at our military structure. All of us who wear the uniform follow. We are set up under civilian leadership, right? In every service. And I think if you look at that and just understand, I got to be able to. I love the Navy Chiefs. I'm gonna be able to work with Navy Chiefs. So they'll get in there and cuss and discuss. Yeah. But when they break, they are moving out together. And you would never know whose idea was what, but they are lockstep because they understand it's about that faith and good order to be able to move productively as a unit. And you can still have ideas and still share things and still have that. But I don't think people realize is how you deal with those situations is how you build up your credibility too.
So you're going to get me on the soapbox. Okay, we have a question, but I have to say something. So the Navy Chiefs fuss and discuss, then they walk out of their mess, and they just roll out, and they're in agreement. As senior NCOs, we should be able to fuss and discuss, and when we walk out together. What we don't do is go back to our duty sections where there's subordinates all around us and fuss and discuss
That's right.
and talk about the stupid decision that the chief made or the commander made or the first sergeant made or my first line super, that's where it's not appropriate. And we've got to get better at, I think, having each other's back. There are times where we got to learn the art of agreeing to disagree because we're not always going to agree. But we say it and we move out. Again, we don't fuss and discuss.
Yeah, and I think the harm in that, because this is an important point I know, but I think the harm in that is that person, when they go back to their work center, because we've all seen it. Yeah. They think they're being a leader. When they go back, when the order's been given, and they're like, and they took the order, they took it from whoever, didn't say anything to you, didn't tell you, hey, what the effect is going to be to my team, and they went back and said, this is the dumbest thing ever, I can't believe we're doing this, but by the way, it's due by COB today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we see it all the time, so you're absolutely right. If there's a real impact and effect that's going to affect that team in a way, you got to communicate that early. You have that opportunity, but after that, you got to move
out. And you're expending resources at that point, and you're doing what I call the middle round checklist. So instead of sitting down around the table talking about how you can't get there, try, right? And Blaze, you threw something out there about credibility. And this goes to Chief Master Sergeant Eric Nielsen, who I replaced as just SOAC Command Chief. And on the Command Chief coin, on the back side of it, it said credibility is the freedom to maneuver. And that has stuck with me forever because you're right. As a follower, going back to Chief Surratt's comment, you have to follow the credibility side of the house. But what I ask is good followership too is to course correct those individuals, right? Yeah. I love it when an airman at all ranks, civilian, military, comes and says, hey Chief, I think you need a little bit of a course correction. I'm not offended by it.
Truth to power.
That's right. It's exactly what it is. So yeah, good words on that.
Okay.
Next question comes from Marcus Bader. He says, do you think we have promoted people too quickly at the junior ranks and have limited their opportunities to build some of these skills? And in parentheses says, staff is the old senior airman.
Yeah. So and we might all have different opinions. This is Joe Max's perspective, and I keep it real. So yes, I think that there are occasions where we've promoted people too quick, and I don't think it's just in the junior ranks. You know, let's just be honest. I think that we've also promoted people in the more senior ranks a little bit faster than we probably should have. And for some folks, it might work out well because they can figure it out and they can build their competencies and get to where they need to go. But for some people like me, I needed to be a full-up round and get developed. I needed to be a squadron superintendent, group superintendent, you know, I needed all of the challenges that I went through. So yeah, I do. How are we gonna get after it? That's gonna be another segment.
I agree, and I think we probably all, and there's probably a lot of you out there on the ones and zeros right now that are, you know, using me as an example. Got promoted to chief way early, was not ready for it whatsoever. Different culture, different community that I grew up in, and it was difficult, right? It was difficult to look at myself in the mirror every night and say, okay, because it's not about being part of the 1% as the chief. I got to be clear. It's about serving the less than 1% who wears the uniform. So I've always been offended by the 1% thing. But I had teammates around me and great leaders, again, to coach, teach, and mentor and season me carrying the bag, right? Going out behind the barn with fellow chiefs who were just in my face, moving forward. Hey, this is how you need to execute. Here's how you need to, you know, hold yourself high and move forward. But as far as the early promotion piece, we do. If you look at senior airman to staff sergeant, right? It's only 6 months time and grade before we promote them, and it goes back to my comment that you know, I think the staff sergeant is the most important rank that you can be promoted to. I mean, you're going into the NCO Corps. Discussions behind the scene, not to dive into the whole ASELC. Chief Master in the Air Force, right? The entire ASELC community is looking at this. You know, how do we get after the airmen that we need, right? It's just not necessarily character and culture, but it's also 20, 25 years down the road, how do we build those frontline supervisors? And Marcus, it goes down to speak truth to power. It goes down to give them all the resources that we can, and just burn the midnight oil to make sure that we are doing our part with sharing and imparting on our wisdom and guidance.
I guess I'd like to add to it though. If you look at the numbers, by the numbers, sure, right? You can see in the time frame in which someone gets promoted. But also you got to understand the men and women that I see join this team, they're not the ones that are always just coming fresh out of high school. And I would argue is age doesn't always mean have anything to do with maturity. I've met some people who are 18 years old that have overcome things in their life where I'm like, man, I would give you people to lead today. I've met people that are in their early 30s and are still figuring things out, right? But what I think is what's important for us is we should never root against those people who have been selected for increased responsibility. And that's shame on us.
Yeah.
Because especially as senior folks, it's our job to help them. The second we start rooting against them, be like, they're not ready. Like, well, whose job do you think it is to get them ready? It's us.
Yep.
And as a guy, like I was in the Great Staff Giveaway. I don't know if you all remember that.
I remember
my
that.
career field promoted 82% to staff sergeant. You know, I barely put any effort in on the promotion test, and I barely made it. And my first sergeant handed me out, because this is when they actually used to, like, the first sergeant had to give your test scores. So I reported to the first sergeant's office, and he looked at me and he says, your airman will deserve more effort than you gave that promotion test. And that freaking hit me, right? That freaking...
What did you score?
It was low. It was low. It was not high, you know?
I love that.
You know,
kudos to that first sergeant.
Of course, like that. But he said that because he cared.
Yeah.
I needed to hear that, you know?
Ooh,
and it absolutely vector checked me to be like, hey. And I just think is we got to make sure, we've talked about this before, that we owe it to those people to talk to them more than about them.
That's right.
Right? We'll have a direct conversation with you. The second we start talking about that person, we're completely in the wrong. You know, because honestly, the only reason they're moving up is because we need them in those positions. The NCO tiers, you won't find NCO tiers across the Air Force that are manned at 100%.
Yeah.
There's spots in the team, we need them to step up, and we need to help them do so.
Okay.
Good word, Blaise. Good words.
Next question comes from Jana Wesley. She says, I often hear chiefs and senior NCOs say they didn't realize the importance of relationships, communication, and connection until they became chiefs and senior NCOs. How does the current EPR and promotion system keep our junior enlisted and NCOs from embracing this early on?
This is freaking phenomenal.
Janae always trying to put us on the spot.
Come on.
Hey, and I will take the MT question too, by the way. But okay, I'm gonna let Pokey answer that one.
Wow, that was a lot, Janae. What was the second part of the EPR process? How
How does the current EPR and promotion system keep our junior enlisted and NCOs from embracing this early on when it comes to relationships, communication, and connection?
I think it goes back to what Blaze brought up, right? It's being real with our airmen. So when it comes to ratings, when it comes to the feedback mechanism, it's no kidding sitting down and having that analog conversation. You know, if they are not ready to promote, if they are, if they're being individual and not a good teammate, we have to be able to document that and have the conversation. And I don't mean by virtue of digital means like, hey, Airman, I need you to go ahead and sign this EPR with no such feedback moving along. But we also got to teach them communications, competency, and character. I had a boss years ago. I'm not going to mention the name. We sat down to do a feedback, and he said, "Hey, Chief, here's my feedback for you. I'm going to draw 3 circles, and they all intertwine in the middle. And it's character, competency, and communication." He said, "You need to hit center mass in all 3 of those." I actually walked away and was kind of shocked because I expected, in ACA, let's sit down and go after goals and move forward. It was eye-opening. But to go back to Janae's piece, we have to get after the enlisted evaluation system that some would argue we've lost the way years ago, and we've embellished it, and everybody is a legacy Firewall 5. Everybody now is truly amongst the best. We need frontline supervisors to rate and give that feedback, and how to get past that, right? Not to have competition. Hey, for you to be Staff Sergeant so-and-so, this is what you need to do. But how do we personally and professionally develop that airman to abide by the traits and qualities that we need wearing this uniform as United States Airmen?
Yeah, the thing I would add is if you look at the current process, so even the EPRs themselves are timed up with what? Promotion cycles. And I think the unfortunate part about it, and I've even heard supervisors, they think is my job is to help you get promoted. Like, if that is the measure of success, is where it all goes wrong, because the math doesn't work out that way.
Yep.
I can have an airman that does everything they're asked to do, and they won't get promoted. And they might miss the fact that you actually grew a ton in the process, or look at what happened on the mission. And I think we have got to shift it to where let your actions and accomplishments speak for you, but the job of the supervisor is to help that individual reach their maximum potential, period. Through honest conversations and giving them opportunities that are directly aligned with the mission needs.
That's right.
And to use their skills and talents. And currently, it doesn't do that.
Yep.
I have airmen that just bust their butt every single day, and they have to look in the rear view and look in their Outlook calendar. Hey, what did I do? Now let's go to bullet writing classes and see how it sounds awesome. But I need airmen looking forward. And I think even we teach SMART objectives in PME. If I put on a promotion test, what does SMART stand for? They can answer it. But if I walk around the Air Force and ask them what are the 3 goals your supervisor gave you to work on that are SMART objectives, no idea.
Yep.
And I think that's the crucial point of where we're missing the mark. And I think we actually have to decouple feedback and promotion. Right? Let commanders decide who is, they have to make the tough calls, but let supervisors focus on doing what they need to do to care for them.
Absolutely. Just real quick, going along with that, we can, as NCOs and senior NCOs, we can delegate quite a bit, right? Because I also believe that delegation spawns growth for our subordinates, right? As long as we're right there, neck and neck, and tied at their hip as we get through some of these hurdles. But the one thing that you can't delegate is responsibility. So as a frontline supervisor, take responsibility on the growth of our airmen, of promotion or not promotion. Get smart on the process. That's what I think, and I was ignorant prior to coming to AFPC, and now I have the luxury because of the warriors around me that coach, teach, and mentor, but I wasn't smart on a lot of these processes, right? So when an airman comes to you and says, hey, why wasn't I promoted? It was kind of one of those, well, because you're not good enough. Not the case, right? It goes back to your thing of, hey, we can't give up. Don't talk about them. Talk with them of how you get them to the next level.
Yeah, it sort of hoard.
They do.
Right? I'm not going to.
This worked for
That's
me.
right,
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have about 7 minutes left, and I'm telling you, I feel like getting another cup of coffee. We are just now we're about to solve some problems. Like we're about to decouple the EPR from
Let's go.
feedback
Let's
to
go.
promotion. All of this can happen, so, all right, what do we have next?
Okay. Next question is from Moya Jones. She says, how do you think the Airmen's use of social media has changed our leadership style?
So that's good. I'm a fan of social media, obviously, because I think it's a way to be able to connect, but I think we have to be wise in how we use our social media as an airman. So as a leader, I think it's an effective tool for me to be able to communicate and connect with a broader audience and be able to push out what is going on in 2nd Air Force, for instance. But I have to be mindful of the things that I say and do can impact. So I have to be careful to separate, Joe Bass's feelings, as a mom and as a friend or what have you. And the other thing, separate to, I guess, how I am on social media, I have to deliberately make sure that I can disconnect from social media in a healthy way. So if social media starts controlling me, my thoughts, behaviors, and I'm scrolling all the time, and now it's consumed who I am,
And
I
that
have
will
to
follow you home.
so you have to have a healthy balance. I like to be on social media to be able to kind of see where my teammates are, where the airmen are, where their thought process is. But you have to have a healthy device and work-life balance. You have to have a healthy connection with that.
Yeah, certainly. I just think it's you got to be clear on why you're using it in the first place. You got to understand, and you just got to be comfortable with it. I think that's what people appreciate is you shouldn't have to game up for it. You shouldn't have to even overthink it. If you have something to share and you'd like to be able to, but I think it's people don't get distracted with you're not trying to go externally. You have to make sure it works for whatever your responsibilities are.
Absolutely.
And if other people can benefit from that, great.
And some people aren't comfortable with it, and that's okay.
And that's okay,
So I feel like you got to be in or out. So I'm not gonna stand up at a public social media site, and I don't post anything, and that's pretty silly. So you either got to be in or you have to be out on that. But it shows, I think, airmen a sense of transparency and vulnerability that falls in line with that EQ piece that I think that Jovan was talking about earlier. It helps with that.
Yeah, information is power. It's not necessarily authority. So going back to the messaging when it comes to social media, I would say if you are deleting posts or hiding pictures, then maybe leading out front on social media might not be your cup of tea, right? I am more probably reactive than proactive, right? I love answering airman questions. I love solving airman problems, especially out on our Air Force personnel public site, because they need to know what we know.
Yeah.
And if that's their mechanism to go to, then it's mine to go. But what we have to be careful of is to make sure, what is being talked about is the truth data. And that comes back to relationships, to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Blaze, tracking this, what's your thoughts? Instead of just jumping in with both feet saying, hey, I got you taken care of, and I'm not getting the full truth behind this.
Right. I think that's what I've appreciated. We talked about the kind of silos before, but now I actually have visibility of what's going on in different areas. And you got to be able to understand what's factual and what's, because there's emotion out there too on that, right? But I all in all, I think the Airmen These Days series that we worked on. But I love it when some of that stuff is shared with like a mom or a parent or a brother back home, like that. It's awesome.
Yeah. Get you giddy up.
So use social media for good, not for bad. And I think also on the personal note, your own personal social media, so we all have to be mindful. I mean, employers use it. Future employers are digging into your social media to see what kind of person are you. There's also Facebook stalkers out there, I know, and so we just have to be mindful of that. Yeah. Cool. All right, BMT question. Is that what somebody said?
There is.
BMT at Keesler. So hey, if you don't find it, if you find it, then let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you guys to give us some thoughts. Is there anything that you want to share with these folks?
Yeah, so obviously it's gotten a lot of attention. We're getting feedback on it. I think it is certainly a thing where if you look at the overall intent is we had to have a capability to be able to exercise a contingency option if need be, right? If need be. And this is what it is it is a pilot to look at it and say, hey, if forced to, or if the nation asks us to, could we operate a BMT elsewhere? And KESA shows at the kind of optimal location, and those individuals that are there, it makes sense that they'll follow on to technical training at that same location, right? So they'll do that one station BMT and tech training experience. That happens for many people. Like I said, about 30% every week stay here at Lackland for schools with us, and then also the 59th Medical Wing. Some go up to Randolph in the 12th Fighter Wing, but I think it's us taking a look at that. And so we have MTIs that are there. We actually have MTIs that are actually coming back from other parts of the Air Force to come and help in this effort. And what I do love about it though is it provides this kind of a it's the healthy competition a little bit, right? Like we'll always have standardizations, we'll always grow airmen, but even like where we can test at smaller scales and one element can look at each other to just ask good questions.
Yeah.
And it's really forced us to adapt in some ways of how we're doing things here, even though it's only been a short pilot. And they'll be graduating here.
So we're on week 5 at BMT to
Yep.
KESA. They graduate next Friday, 15th of May, and we're excited. Right now we have 57 folks going through. The Air Force has asked us to execute. The pilot is successful. It's asked us to execute. So starting on the 2nd of June, we will have 60 airmen on the ground, or recruits on the ground at Keesler. The following week we'll have another 60. So we're gonna push people through Keesler. It's not meant to be enduring people. Like it, we are gonna do this as a way to surge and bring people into our Air Force. But it's a great capability. All right. So it is 10 o'clock Central Time. I want to be mindful of everybody's time because honestly, I could pour another cup of coffee. I've written down notes, and that's something that I always do because I gained something from you guys. You guys have each said something that I'm like, ooh, that's going to be good. Like one of the things that I want to pick apart is how, we have a lot of leaders who want the title, but they don't want the responsibility. So that's going to be another time. That's the next one. That's going to be a good one. So with that, is there anything you guys want to share with the teammates out there?
I just want to, real quick, I want to throw out, because the theme of today was about relationships, and I want to throw out something of this team and collaborating together. So let's go back to March real quick. I don't think anybody wearing this uniform or in the United States would have thought that we'd be operating in the current contested environment that we are with COVID-19. So problem statement number 1, how do we keep the machine going? How do we keep the pipeline moving so we can continue with lethality in what we have told these airmen that we are going to give them as they move forward. So this thing called tech school graduates, right? And at the time we could only send them to the CONUS area. Well, the team, Chief Pryor, Colonel Sensano, Colonel Rokers, the entire COVID-19 AFPC team got together and they started up a TTG working group. And Chief Bass got some 2nd Air Force folks on board. We got PACAF and USAFE. To make a long story short, what I can tell you is in the span of a few weeks, the door has opened to send tech school graduates to USAFE and PACAF. And being done at the local level where Chief Bass's superintendents down at the tech schools will have the opportunity, if they're graduating early, if they're graduating delayed, to pick up the phone and call what we say 2 gatekeepers. Call USAFE and PACAF to say, hey, can you accept, can you not accept? And then go from there, whether they hold short, whether they get on an airplane and move forward. I gotta be honest with you, I never thought that would be I thought that was a vision. Well, it is now a reality because of relationships, because of everybody having that problem statement and knowing how we get after it. How do we care for these airmen families during COVID-19? And I will lead you with lead without fear, lead boldly, and holy cow, just love one another, take care of each other. That's it.
It's awesome, Pogie.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, so certainly, the theme of relationships, the teamwork, internal in this wing, and every wing, every center, every part of the Air Force it's been amazing to watch. It does make me ask though, why were we doing some of these things before?
Yeah.
Right? And I would say is relationships will continue to be the difference in us focusing on the priorities and staying united, because we realize we're on this Air Force team together. We are, and I think we're gonna have to make sure we continue to stay razor focused on that too. I would just ask everybody through all this, because I think it's just been beautiful to see people at the lowest level just solving problems, just getting after it, and not pushing up through command channels, just getting after it. Say, hey, I need some help, because we all live to kind of answer that call, to be there for somebody else, and I've seen that over and over again. So we just got to keep that going, and then be just honest and truthful about. I ain't got time for that. That makes no sense, that has no value, and never let that come back in our ranks. But I would just offer, for me, I would say is the relationships piece and how we treat each other, regardless of rank, regardless of just being good humans to each other. We talk about that. And I thought about this, last week and going at the commissary, and we've seen empty shelves, we've seen how people are treating each other even in the commissary. And I thought about, what about the commissary test? Because there's something beautiful about the commissary. There's people, young and old, all the populations, but the commissary test to me is, if I see you in 10 years, would I stop and say hello?
I like that.
Right? Or would I pass the aisle up? Would I avoid you? And I think is in us being decent to each other, regardless of whether we agree or not, the emotional intelligence we talked about, we're still teammates.
Yeah.
And I still care about you. And we all should be able to pass the commissary test. So I just share that with everybody. If you're self-evaluating your own relationships, think about that.
Love that.
I wish we could give a group hug. So one thing I do want to close it out with, before we went live, we were talking about some of the things that we've accomplished through COVID. Just being able to maneuver fast and move at the speed of relevancy within the training pipeline, within process and policies and AFPC, some of the policies that Chief Wesley and her team are doing up at half to include our functional communities. We can't go back to doing silly stuff. We can't go back to not being able to move fast and get after stuff. And so we're just putting the warning order out there. When we are done with COVID, we've learned smarter, better ways to do stuff, we're about to get after it. So everybody who owns an AFI that keeps us from doing that, be ready to rewrite them because we've got to just move it and go better. And then the last thing that I'll say is, so I love that. Be a good human. Here's what I'm going to tell you, and this is just my closing out. Be a good human to those closest to you. That means to your family members, because we were talking about that. Sometimes we're such good humans to our teammates, and if you came to my door, I'd hug you. But if my husband comes, through the door, I'm like, hey, yeah, be a good human to your children, to your spouse, to mom and dad. Pick up the phone, call them, connect with them. You should never treat other people better than those who are closest to you. So, all right. Hope you all had fun at coffee time. Can't wait to have it again.
Thanks, team.
We will probably have a tech training airman or a junior airman with me next time because I'm excited to have coffee and introduce you to some of the airmen that are in our formations now so you can get just as excited. Whatever questions you have, send them our way. We'll still answer those. I cannot believe we didn't get a ton of questions about AFPC, but that's good. Send them your way. We're going to send them to folks like Chad Pryor and Hoagie and everybody. All right, peace out, people.